I've been waiting in the wings like a dog on a chain.
Well, all right, it is a tremendous pleasure to be back here. I'm going to go on this side of the stage in the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza. I want to thank very much our host, the City of Thousand Oaks. This is a beautiful venue. Your staff is so talented, and they answer. We are a very demanding customer, and so I want to thank the crew and the entire team that helps us put this event on. So it's great to be back here with you. This is the most full this room has ever been, so I know there's some of you that have not been to a Center for Economic and Research and Forecasting, CERF, Economic Forecast event before, so I want to welcome you and introduce myself. I'm Matthew, the current Executive Director. If you don't know CERF, this is sort of our brand. We're this unique, nationally recognized economic forecasting center, and yet we are deeply rooted in Ventura County. In terms of what that looks like, just to give you a sense, what do we mean by nationally recognized? What's locally rooted? Well, the center was actually founded 17 years ago by two economists, Bill Watkins and Dan Hamilton. At the time, they were running the Economic Forecast Project, a very renowned forecast center at UC Santa Barbara, and CLU-CERF did this amazing thing. Chuck Maxey, the dean at the time, and President Kimball airlifted the Economic Forecast Project out of Santa Barbara, and it came here. And it's been here for 17 years. They already had a national reputation, but they began winning. They won the first of a number of national forecasting awards. Dan and Bill, this is actually the year I arrived, but I arrived long after the forecasts had been submitted. I had no part of this. They were the second most accurate U.S. quarterly GDP forecast in the entire United States among the top 80 forecasting houses. So remarkable track record that began with Bill. And actually, amazingly, for the first time in a number of years, Bill Watkins is here. Bill, where are you? Oh, he's back here. All right. So Bill, this is all your fault, and we're grateful to have you back. As those of you who've been to this event before know, we are an unconventional set of economists. Many times, not only our forecasts, but our analysis sort of places us outside the economic consensus, and the consensus has been systematically wrong for a number of years. And so that's sort of thinking differently has enabled us to win a number of national forecasting awards. Bill Watkins and Dan Hamilton were actually invited by Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, to be part of the inaugural group that forecasted the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. That's now the Fannie Mae Home Price Index. And Dan and I are coming off an amazing stretch where we've won 4 Crystal Ball Awards in 6 years. This is news if you were here last year. 2 months after last year's event, we won our 4th Crystal Ball Award, and this one's remarkable because CERF was the #1 single most accurate 2-year ahead forecast of U.S. home prices. Thank you. The best we had done previously was a #3 finish, and you can see there the runner-ups were the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, the International Monetary Fund, Moody's, and Wharton. I'm not making that up. That's really true. And this is a huge tribute to Dan Hamilton, who, as you heard Veronique say, is just one of the best in the world. So big round of applause to my colleague, Dan Hamilton. All right. But we believe that, frontier economic forecasting tools, all of this economic expertise is really only as valuable as the impact that it has. And we are rooted here in Ventura County. We want to have impact here. And so since I've come in, I'm an applied economist, and I really want to use the tools and the insights of economics to address challenges confronting our community. And so this has taken a number of interesting forms. Did you know that the Ventura County Healthcare Agency, working with all of the cities and working with Oxnard Fire, actually conducted one of the most ambitious COVID-19 antibody studies in the entire United States? CERF was actually brought in order to actually manage sort of the research design of this study. We collected over 15,000 blood samples throughout the county in the darkest days of the pandemic, and we learned that actually the asymptomatic transmission rate was only about 3%. And it was really this data that was one of the inputs to the county's decision to be the very first county in California to reopen the economy to business and also, very importantly, the first county to reopen in-person learning for school. We actually have the Education Commissioner here in the front row, Cesar, and I just want to thank county leadership so much. If you think back to those uncertain times, and this is long before the arrival of shots, COVID shots, and the courage that was employed by our leaders in city and county leadership, elected officials, was simply extraordinary. And actually, Ventura County did extremely well during the pandemic. Now, one other thing I think that's really interesting, just the academic, sort of the data nerd in me thinks is so interesting about this, is that we were also among the very first to recognize that the COVID vaccines were not likely to confer immunity. Right, because we were tracking antibodies, and you can see here, this is a list, this is about a third of the 150 people we actually drew blood from who tested positive, and we saw this very rapid decay in antibody levels in the human body. That meant that even if the vaccine stimulated antibody production, that we expected this decay. And so this study was really, really groundbreaking at the time, and it's just a sign of how we want to use the tools and insights of economics to make a difference. We were also, CERF had the privilege of being part of an absolutely historic groundwater monitoring program and opening the very first groundwater market in California. This has been held up by the U.S. Department of Agriculture as a model for the nation. This is also critically really speaks to the innovation of farmers here in Ventura County to move to this new paradigm of managing scarce resources like groundwater. And so this is just another example of where we really want to be involved in the community and making a difference. And so I really encourage you, inside your folder, there's a one-pager about CERF. I encourage you to go visit the CERF website. You can learn about the initiatives. You can read about CERF in the news where this effort is being oops, didn't mean for you to see that one quite yet, where you can really learn about that work and you can partner with us. We really encourage you to join us, become a sponsor, all right? Promote this event in your network so that it keeps getting bigger and bigger, because we do really believe that collectively we're making a big difference in the county. All right, so we are nationally recognized, deeply rooted. We are also battle-tested economists. So that's a photo of Dan and me just a few days after last year's event in this room, right? We took on some challenging policy issues. You may have seen the mushroom cloud rising slowly over the Ventura County Star, where there was a volley of 6 or 7 op-eds, right, attacking CERF. I mentioned a second ago, we want you to partner with us. We want you to be sponsors. We're so grateful for all of the organizations that sponsor CERF. One of those accusations was that we were paid for by the development industry, right? I encourage you to search our sponsorship list. There aren't any developers, but if you're a developer and you would like to partner with CERF, okay, I'm getting accused of it anyway, so consider a CERF sponsorship, all right? So nationally recognized, deeply rooted, battle-tested, right? So that sort of gives you a sense of CERF and the work that we're engaged in. I want to spend quite a bit of time now on Ventura County. So I'm going to start with this. You've seen this table before if you've been here in the room or seen me present in other places around the county. We call this the Peak Ventura County table. If you haven't been to one of CERF's presentation, I want to ask you, does this surprise you? Does it surprise you that Ventura County's population peaked in 2016, 10 years ago? It hasn't declined in every single year. In fact, in 2024, the population grew very modestly. But we're now 2.6% below peak population. Does it surprise you that the labor force, the number of people who live in Ventura County who have a job, peaked in 2012, 14 years ago, and is down about 2%? For those of you that have seen this before, actually labor force growth is one of the brighter spots in the economy right now. We have seen growth over the last 4 years, although from a very low level. And does this surprise you? Real GDP, the total amount of economic activity in the county, peaked in 2007, before the financial crisis, and is now about 7% lower. That is an improvement. It was 9% lower last year. That is an improvement. But this is a sign of economic weakness. And just to give you a sense with this GDP figure, if Ventura County had continued to grow at the average growth rate of the state of California from 2007 onward, so if we had just kept pace with the broader state, we would not be 6.6% smaller. The economy would be 50% bigger than it is today. 50% bigger, right? And so there's real work. This is a sign of economic weakness. And so population, this showed up in the data actually before GDP growth. And what you see here is that we're down from that peak in around 2016. And that, yes, we did actually grow modestly, very, very small amount in 2024, but we did see population decline in 2025, right, the most recent year that we have data. Labor force growth is a little stronger, and in fact, one of the things that's nice to report here is that we've seen this sustained climb from the COVID trough, and actually, this level right here, this bar, is the pre-COVID size of the labor force, and since we saw you last year, we actually finally surpassed the pre-COVID labor force in Ventura County. So that's a sign for hope and optimism that that continues to grow. And then GDP is an interesting one. We got a very interesting number 2 weeks ago. So because of the government shutdown, data was delayed, and they finally released a data program that normally arrives in early December 2 weeks ago, and we got what's called the preliminary estimate of Ventura County GDP. And what you see here is actually this is a very strong number. In fact, this preliminary estimate means Ventura County, if it holds, if it survives revisions, grew more strongly than the state of California and the United States in the last 12 months. Now, the one thing I want to caution is that we have seen this twice before. This is a very strong GDP growth, and it's the preliminary estimate. 1 year from now, they will release the preliminary estimate of 2025, and they will release what's called the first estimate of 2024. So this is a preliminary estimate. It's based on partial data, incomplete data, and it will be revised. What's interesting is that if this holds, this is good news for Ventura County, but it is at odds. It's orthogonal, as we would say as economists, to jobs data and population data in the county. And so we fear that this could be revised downward next year. And in terms of what we're talking about in terms of jobs and population data, you heard about the population. We declined in the last 12 months. The other thing that's interesting is in the jobs world. So this is a table of jobs by industry. What matters here is that jobs are up 16.7% from 2007. So even though the population's declined, the labor force has declined, GDP is smaller, the number of jobs is actually at all-time highs, and the number of jobs has grown 16.7% since 2007. What's interesting is that job growth is concentrated in a single sector, education and healthcare. In fact, education and healthcare, that's 16,000, grew 27,000. If it weren't for education and healthcare, we would have 10,000 fewer jobs in the county today than we did back in 2007. Even though we had gains, modest gains in 2,000 new jobs in education and healthcare, last year, with total job losses, total job growth was negative. We had about 5,000 fewer jobs at the end of 2025 than we did at the beginning. And so again, this is where there's work to be done. This data is at odds with what we saw in that GDP number. Now here, this is just a visual way to represent that. You see the dramatic growth in education and healthcare. In fact, those jobs are now 86% higher. This purple line is non-healthcare jobs, and you see that they are actually negative, 3.6% lower. Now, one of the things that's challenging is that the jobs that we're producing in large numbers are in relatively low-paying sectors. So average salary of about $58,000. That is not sufficient to support home ownership in Ventura County. If we look at the highest-paying sectors, enterprise management, utilities, financial services, professional and technical, those industries have an average salary of close to $150,000, which would support homeownership. And unfortunately, those have been in fairly sustained decline. So there's work to be done. Now, there's really promising news in the last few months from Amgen and Takeda making very serious investments here in the county. I thought it was really interesting that Amgen's CEO, when they made that announcement of the new innovation center, said, okay, we're making the investment, we're creating the jobs. Now it's your job to build the houses, to build homes for our workers. obviously that's an important nexus in all of this. Amidst this picture of economic weakness, we still see rising home prices. In fact, the average of the last 12 months median home price did increase from $924,000 to $941,000. That is only a modest gain. It's actually a real decline. It was less than the growth of inflation, interestingly. And all of this together leaves Ventura County where it was 1 year ago, which is the second most unaffordable county in the entire United States. And so there's work to be done in terms of this jobs housing mismatch. We're producing jobs that don't offer the opportunity for that worker to live in Ventura County. And that means each new job often means one more commuter on the 101, the 118, the 126, commuting into the county from a more affordable region. And it's time to house our workforce here. And I do just want to take a moment and say, because we're going to jump now into policy, is that we have remarkable leadership in this county. And I see this in the cities, in city managers' offices, planning departments, city councils. I see this in the county executive's office, the county supervisor, the economic vitality group at the county. These people are working tirelessly every day to secure opportunity to our residents. And so a picture of economic weakness is a reflection on us because of the policies that were passed 20 years ago that have bound the policymakers of today, people that are trying to provide for our community. This is an update to the permits data. So what you see here, obviously, is that prior to 2000, you can see here that we were averaging about 3,000 residential units a day. We were building more single-family homes in purple than we were multifamily homes in gold. You can see that we essentially reached build-out in around 2005, so this is before the onset of the financial crisis. We reached build-out. Much of the developable land within urban growth boundaries was reached about that time, and we've just had a very, very, very large lack of development, of new starts. And you see now that we are actually building, we have made real progress in multifamily residences. So this is to be celebrated. You heard that from Mikey Taylor here in Thousand Oaks about the work they're doing. You can see those numbers are consistent with that pre-build-out level of multifamily home production, but you see we've simply stopped building single-family homes. And that means we're not providing that housing ladder that's essential to house a workforce in Ventura County and give people an upward ladder of economic mobility. We showed you this last year, but just to give you a sense, I'll just jump to these numbers here on the right. In the 1990s, we were producing about 28% fewer homes per capita than the nation. That has accelerated, and what you can see now is so far in the last 6 years, we're producing about 2/3 fewer homes per capita than the nation as a whole. And what's interesting is there's a housing shortage you're hearing about in every metropolitan area in the United States. There's a national phenomenon of decreasing housing affordability, a lack of new supply. And we're falling farther and farther behind in that regard. And so net migration, of course, has been negative for a number of years, right? As people sort between here and lower cost, more affordable environments. Now, one of the things that we've sort of asked is, okay, so there's net migration. There's some people leaving, there's some people coming. We're highlighting that difference, the number of people, but one question is, who is it that's leaving? And so what we looked at here are changes in age and income distribution as a result of that net migration. And what you can see here is that it's people under the age of 40 are overrepresented in the group that's leaving. And you can see it's actually people over the age of 65 that are among the people migrating into the county from somewhere else in the United States. We also see that it's the middle class. It's people between $50,000 and $150,000. That's an income that's sufficient to support homeownership in many other metropolitan areas around the United States. And so younger folks in middle incomes are the most likely to leave the county for somewhere else, to start a family, build a household, start a career. And so that's economic growth that's happening somewhere else. I do encourage you to visit. A couple of years ago, we actually spent some time actually getting to know some of these folks who were born and raised here in Ventura County, who made the choice to leave for another community and really ask them to tell their stories. Travis here is actually a firefighter here. He is still a firefighter here. Born and raised in Simi Valley, went to Simi Valley High School, and he commutes to his job as a firefighter from San Antonio, Texas. He actually reduced his home costs so much that it's actually cheaper to commute by airplane than it is to buy a home here in Ventura County. So I encourage you to check those stories out. It's just one more example of trying to show the human beings that are represented in the data. A big part of this is policy decisions that were made a number of years ago. We have the most stringent urban growth controls in the county. We talked about this at length last year. We actually went back and talked to the architect of those policies, Bill Fulton, who's a renowned land use planner, said, hey, you were here from the beginning. You were part of this system of urban growth boundaries that don't move. What worked, what didn't, and what do you think needs to change? And so I encourage you to check out that feature, which we showed in this room a year ago. And he actually said that it's not possible to build an income ladder, right, to actually attract employers who will produce jobs at middle and higher income levels, given the restrictions that policy place on the urban areas in Ventura County. So check that out. He actually said here, you see, if you start a business in Ventura County, it's almost impossible to scale it. Current boundaries are incompatible with maintaining an income ladder. These are Bill Fulton's words, one of the architects of these policies. And he really said we need to think about land use policy as economic development policy. Those are not two separate things. That's also to say you cannot have economic development policy without addressing land use policy. And so what we want to do now is, that was really the focus of last year's Ventura County portion, was actually talking about these policies. The year before, talking about the individuals affected by them. But there's one group that is impacted by policy in the county that actually we haven't done enough to talk about. And so we really wanted to feature this year one of the things that is critical to the identity of Ventura County. This is an incredible legacy that we have. It is critical to the physical character, the extraordinary outdoor spaces that we enjoy, the environmental amenities that they provide, and that's Ventura County's multi-generational farming families. And so I want to show you two videos, but the first one is nothing short of just a love letter to multi-generational farming. As I mentioned, we are deeply rooted here. We love our community, and we understand all the benefits that we enjoy as residents of the cities because of these really remarkable members of our community. So enjoy this.
Many people in Ventura County who come from legacy farming families have some sort of interesting immigrant story. My great-grandmother during the Armenian genocide, she was, I believe, 12 years old and had to flee through the Syrian desert with her mother and her younger sibling. During that journey, her mother was captured and killed. And so she had to continue on by herself, 12 years old, with her younger sibling. They somehow made it to America, and she, unfortunately, because of her age, had to give up my grandpa for adoption, and he was adopted by a Portuguese farming family that was recently immigrated, and they adopted him. He started farming, and we've been here ever since.
We're really latecomers to Ventura County compared to some of the other legacy families around here. We started in the 1890s. We're still farming. We're into our 5th generation with my 2 kids, William and Alyssa. We farm vegetables and strawberries and peppers and all over Ventura County. My son William grew up working on the ranch. In high school, we would send him out to drive tractors or work with the irrigators in the field, moving sprinkler pipe, hooking up drip lines. Alyssa has a gift of language, and so she's able to work with the workers.
One of my earliest memories on the farm is being with my dad and driving with him in his truck to different farms and getting out with him, and he would talk to workers. And the main language spoken in agriculture is Spanish. For whatever reason, as a child, I could not quite wrap my head around the concept of people speaking other languages. I don't know why it was so mind-blowing to me, but it really was, and it really impacted me. And so when I went to college, I thought, okay, I know what I want to study. I want to study Spanish. And when I graduate, I want to come back to the farm and I want to see if I can put those language skills to good use to really represent people who are here that may not speak English. My name is Alyssa Terry, and I'm a farm labor contractor in Ventura County. Many of the employees that I work with on a day-to-day basis, I have known for over a decade. I've met their families, gone to birthday parties. They really do become such a piece of your life. Farming is definitely integral to the identity of Ventura County. I don't think Ventura County would be Ventura County without our farming communities. Even if you don't think about ag on a day-to-day basis living here, it's involved in your life.
It still is very important, I think, to the aesthetics of Ventura County. The openness that we have here, the division between the cities, unlike Los Angeles where one city runs into another, the agriculture is still an important component of the lifestyle of Ventura County. A lot of people equate agriculture with that Gothic American photo of grandma and grandpa with a pitchfork in front of a hay bale. And I think that gives us false sense of what we are. We're business people. And as business people, we take a lot of risks. And the risks stem from Mother Nature to land use policy to water policy to labor policy. And we're trying to juggle all of those balls in the air. And I think it is the appreciation that we are trying to make a living as business owners no differently than any other business person in the county.
I think many people don't quite understand what being a farmer means to those people who are farmers. It is not just a job, it's a lifestyle. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Crops do not stop growing because you want to take a day off. I have never wanted to work anywhere else. It is very important to me and my brother that we continue the family's legacy for as long as we can. The knowledge that farmers have is indispensable because it's not something that you can just go to school and learn. It's an accumulation of all the knowledge of all of the generations that came before you and were passed on. It's a shared inheritance that we are all responsible for stewarding.
All right. If you are in any way connected to the agricultural industry in Ventura County, will you raise your hand? Awesome. We are so grateful for the legacy that you've provided in our county. I also want to just take a step back real quick and say, holy smokes. Jake David, Shoreward Media, is he here? Jake, will you stand up? So we have partnered over the last few years with the most remarkable storyteller. Jake is the videographer, the motion picture editor, the drone pilot, and so we're really grateful for your skills as we try and tell these stories. So if you need these types of services, Shoreward Media is your organization. All right, now in terms of agriculture, this is so critical to the character and the identity of California, of Ventura County. It's an economic contributor, but it contributes so much more in terms of fire buffers in our cities. They cleans our air, all of the various lifestyle amenities that it provides. But I hope this shocks you a little bit. Did you know that over the last 4 years, real economic output in Ventura County's agriculture sector has declined by almost 25%? And so this is an industry that is in distress in Ventura County. And I think we need to ask the question, because this is so vitally important to the economy and to the character and the identity of our community, what can we be doing to support the long-term viability? Now, I'm going to show you one more video that's going to highlight some of the challenges confronted in farming. But I want to sort of lay out some of the basics real quick. One of the amazing dynamics is this one right here. This is Pleasant Valley Road in the city of Camarillo. There is an urban growth boundary that runs right down this street. And I was on the county assessor's site the other day, and this is a remarkable economic pattern. These houses right here on this side of the road are actually valued and taxed at a rate that says the value of the land is equivalent to $5.5 million an acre. That's the value of developable land without improvements in Ventura County. Now, not every one of those is taxed at that rate, obviously, because the assessor can only increase the value 2% every year after it's sold. But if you look at the ones that are recently sold, over $5 million, this land right here is $75,000 an acre. The development right has been stripped off it, and this actually has, we want to preserve the integrity of our cities, right? We want a clear ag-urban interface. My academic research is all about urban growth boundaries, and I'm a huge fan of growth boundaries. But the fact that these growth boundaries can never move actually has implications for farmers. By stripping the development right, we strip their access to capital. You're going to hear a story about the increasing costs of farming, and farmers have to borrow money for every acre they plant with the hope that they'll actually have a harvest that they'll be able to pay back the loan, right? And what they borrow against, their collateral, is their land. And so this incredible pattern you will not see anywhere else on earth, 5,075,000, that's a 60x multiple, right? Does change farmers' access to capital. You need to know that farming costs have been increasing dramatically in Ventura County. In fact, you see here that for strawberries, so strawberries right now are about $708 million per year in output. That is the single most valuable crop in Ventura County. About 10,000 acres are grown. And what you see here is that the costs, just since 2014, have gone from $43,000 to $72,000. Inflation has gone up about 36%. Grower costs have gone up about 67%, so almost double the rate of inflation, right? And this is in the form of inputs. This is in the form of labor, right? These are regulatory and compliance costs that have been imposed on farmers. And they are competing in international markets, in many cases competing with organizations in Mexico that have a very different regulatory environment. And so what they need to do is they need to make the investments to enhance productivity so that they can stay ahead of this curve and compete in global markets. If we want agriculture to remain in Ventura County and be sustainable, we need to change that dynamic. Give them access to capital so they can make those investments, right? And one of the simple things that we need to do is actually allow more food processing on agricultural land. Now, when we updated our land use ordinances in 2016, we actually we advertised that we were allowing food processing on ag lands. And so you see here, this is the language from the ordinance. If the county passes a food processing zoning ordinance, then the following shall be permitted: up to 12 acres of food processing. There are 93,000 irrigated acres, and we will allow 12, provided that no individual facility exceeds 3 acres. And the average food processing facility in Ventura County is about 6 acres. But we can only process locally grown food on that 3-acre facility. And imagine you're trying to do like a salad mix. We may not grow every single thing here, but you can't bring products in from the outside to create the value-added processing that you need. It's also the case that it might be that you only produce the things that you're going to process part of the season. And it would be natural to bring products from the south later in the year, from the north earlier in the year, but that's not allowed on that 3-acre site. It says no facility can be placed on land designated prime, unique, or statewide importance. That sets 118,000 acres of agricultural land outside consideration. There are only 93,000 of irrigated. And this restricts on 118. That means there's some non-irrigated lands that this prohibits food processing on, right? And then no facility requires expansion of extension or sewer lines. What's interesting about our land use planning is that we put the urban growth boundary on the LAFCO sphere of influence line. We don't build sewer lines outside those. The number of properties that have existing sewer lines outside of existing urban areas is nearly non-existent. And then all permits shall be completed by January 1st, 2030. Well, what's interesting is that this was passed in 2016, but it was actually just last year that the supervisors, we had a pro-growth, pro-flexibility county supervisors again, making courageous decisions, actually approved this ordinance. And so now growers have 4 years to do all of the permitting for a facility. All right, permitting in Ventura County can often take many, many, many years. And so that's to say there's real work to be done, right? And so this is just one example where we can change policy tomorrow in order to give growers the flexibility to compete and to remain viable, right? And so with that, I want to actually show you one more video here before we wrap, and it'll sort of get into some of these challenges and the real hard work that growers are doing, again, to not only compete and to provide economic opportunity for workers and economic output for the region, but also to maintain this incredible legacy that we all benefit from here.
Ventura County is incredibly productive because of the climate and the soil. It's a really unique place geographically. We're in the perfect spot in the northern hemisphere, not too far from the equator, not too far up north. We have these east-west mountain ranges that are close to the coast, so in the valleys and in the plains below, we have really thick, healthy topsoils, and that allows us to have an incredible diversity of high-quality products grown here. So most farmers are just like me and my family, where we rely on our collateral to be able to access capital, and our collateral is our land. So when you think about farming in Ventura County, it's a very labor-intensive, high-value crops. They're expensive to grow. They require a lot of assets, a lot of investment, and being able to access capital is a really important part for us to be able to stay and maintain the viability of our business long term. So just looking at strawberries, which is the largest contributor to ag GDP in the county, the average crop is going to cost in excess of $40,000 an acre in growing expense. When you start harvesting, and you're harvesting over a 6, 7, 8 month period, you can get well in excess of $70,000 in total expense an acre. So if you think about a 100-acre field, a 500-acre field, a 1,000-acre field, you could see how expensive and how extraordinarily challenging it is to come up with that kind of cash before you have any product sold.
Voters in the mid-1990s saw fit to enact land use restriction policies beyond green belts, and it was called CELU-CERF. The voters of Ventura County have saw fit through land use initiatives to keep agriculture here. Has it preserved the farmland? Probably so. Has it preserved farming? Not in the least. If folks want agriculture to survive, it has to be able to turn a profit. Farming is not any different than any other industry in the country.
Let's say I wanted to build a salad packing and processing plant or a cooler or some other sort of value-add facility on our farm. We quite literally could not do it because the way the rules sit right now. It's structurally impossible for a farmer to go in and build these types of projects. So what ends up happening is we export a lot of the products that we grow here to another region, and that region gets the benefit of taking those products and making them more valuable before they hit the grocery store.
It's a struggle to put up farm worker housing in this county, which you think would be a slam dunk. It's hard just to build a shop on farmland here because of the land use restrictions. So if you're gonna allow us to farm here, then you gotta allow us to farm here.
My name's Will Terry. I'm a 5th generation farmer here in Ventura County. I'm VP of Terry Farms. I grew up in the city of Ventura. I still live there today. I hope that someday my kids will have the same opportunities I did to get into the ag space if they so choose. It's a multidisciplinary business, and it's not just, the mom and pop standing out there with the pitchfork with the kids on their hip. You talk about ag businesses that need to access capital, that have improvements they need to be making on the farm in order to future-proof themselves. They really don't have the collateral value that they should in order to make that business more viable. While we've kept farmland intact in Ventura County, we haven't kept farmers who actually are the stewards of that farmland intact and profitable to the point that they can really thrive in the area. A message I would give is that it's never too late to change course. We don't have to continue making the same mistakes. Intentions have always been, I think, pure. With the benefit of time, we've come to realize that there's some major mistakes that have been made on the land use permitting side, land use policy side. There's no reason why we couldn't address two issues at the same time. We could address the long-term viability of agriculture, and we could also address the housing crisis we do have here in the county. We have a real affordability crisis, and smart development starting at the nucleus of a city, working on infill, and then moving the boundaries systemically from there can address both things at the same time. I'm a 5th generation farmer here in the county, and I'm particularly concerned trying to make it to the 6th generation so my kids have the opportunity, if they so choose,
All right, so to sort of wrap up, like there's work to be done here. And again, I want to, once again, I didn't say the words thank you, so I want to say thank you to the really talented staff that we have in our cities and our county. I want to thank elected officials, city councils and the county supervisors. I want to thank city managers' offices who are just doing incredible work. We have bound their ability. Decisions that were made many years ago constrain what's possible now, but it's never too late to change. There's work to be done, and I really think in this case that we can make Ventura County much more sustainable for agriculture, and just very modest changes to policy can achieve that. And this is a legacy that's worth continuing. I do also just want to add, if we don't do this, agriculture will look very, very, very different in Ventura County. A multi-generational farming family needs access to capital through the collateral value they have in their land. But, investment firms, right, multinational agribusinesses, right, that have no roots in Ventura County do have access to capital. And so there can continue to still be, and I actually think what we need is a mix of both in Ventura County for it to really, really, really thrive. But I do want to warn that Ventura County could look very, very different. And so there is work to be done. There's also other models. We talked about this last year, and because I'm out of time, I'm not going to dive into this. But our urban growth boundaries are modeled on the state of Oregon, who was the very first to do this, and they've been doing it for 50 years. If you look at the Willamette Valley, a glorious place, it's actually the place where our urban growth boundaries were first sort of tested and built, right? And Ventura County was built on that model. But they actually do some things that we don't do. They actually have to plan housing needs, and they have to move boundaries every 10 years. So there are ways to go about this that can preserve voter initiative ballot measures for expansion of boundaries, but then at some interval we empower local planners to move. That's the Oregon model. You can reach out to us if you're curious to hear more about that. Given all that, really this is a status quo forecast for Ventura County. So that's to say growth slightly below United States average, but that's positive growth for the entire forecast horizon. So in that sense, this is actually a sunnier forecast than we gave 1 year ago. Net migration flat, not accelerating as we see in the county, but net migration at a rate that's slightly higher than the state of California. We continue to see home prices rise. In fact, we anticipate average median across 12 months will exceed $1 million here shortly. And that's to say the affordability crisis is still here and alive and is a major policy challenge for the county. Going forward, trying to secure economic growth that will produce rising wages and upward social mobility for all members of our community. So there's work to be done. Now, I want to finish with, in the interest of time, we showed you this last year, but this is Matt Levere's call to action.
My name's Matt Levere. I am a native son. I'm actually a second-generation Ventura County resident, currently raising my 2 young daughters here, so my family has deep roots in this community. If there was one challenge I would give to all of the attendees at the event today, is we all have a role to play in terms of solving the county's housing crisis. We all have to get engaged. For too long, there's been, in my view, a vocal minority controlling the discussion about smart growth in Ventura County. But for all of those who want Ventura County to be economically viable, economically prosperous moving forward, for all of us who want a Ventura County where our kids and our grandkids can thrive, it starts today by getting involved at the local level, attending your city council meetings, attending the board of supervisors meetings, speaking up for the importance of housing. So in 20, 30 years, when our kids and our grandkids are hoping to come back to Ventura County just like I did, they have those opportunities, which so many people in my generation didn't have.
So I just want to add, you have a role to play, not just supporting your elected officials, thanking city and county staff, as they do the hard work. You have a role to play, not just advocating for housing, you also have a role to play advocating for agriculture in Ventura County. And so with that, I thank you so much for your time and attention. We're so grateful to share this space with you and this information. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Maureen.